Well, today we kick off our summer sermon series. We're going to spend some time in these next 4 weeks or so in the book of Ruth, Old Testament book of Ruth. So let me give you a minute to get there, find your spot. We're in Ruth chapter 1 today, and I want to give you a little bit of backstory by way of introduction to the book of Ruth. In your Old Testament, Ruth comes just after the book of Judges. Judges is an interesting book because the Israelites are trying as best they can to find their identity in the promised land. And it's wrought with all kinds of difficulties and things that they had never expected before. And there's no manual for this. They're just trying to get it figured out. And the book of Judges lists the leaders of Israel. Judges are not kings. They don't serve as kings. They serve as, judges. I mean, their job is to settle disputes. There's no real central form of government or authority that the whole nation can sort of gather around and say, this is ours. And as you're reading through the book of Judges, you're going to get periodically, strategically placed through the book of Judges, there will be this refrain. In those days, there was no king in Israel. The book laments. There's no king in Israel. So everyone was left to do what was right in their own eyes. And as you're kind of reading through there, the book of Judges sort of illustrates this a little bit. And then periodically, in fact, more often, is this refrain. In those days, this person, this judge, or this clan of Israelites, or this people group, what they actually did was evil in the eyes of the Lord. And so God gave them over to their enemies. And so there they were over being oppressed by their enemies. And then they came to their senses and they cried out, and God heard and delivered them. But then there was no king in Israel, so they were left to do what was right in their own eyes. And the moral, kind of the main theme of the particular story is this, is that because there was no king in Israel, Israel was left to do what was right in its own eyes. And when they did what was right in their own eyes, what they were actually really doing was evil in the eyes of the Lord. In the book of Ruth sort of picks right up at this theme. And the book of Ruth is also very, very interesting in that it is one of the few books in our Bibles where many scholars concurred. This is probably a book that was written by a lady. This is one of the books that is probably most confident that this is one of the books. This is a lady telling the story. And so what I'd like to do for our series is just to, instead of you listening to me kind of drone on about ladies, and we're going to invite one of the ladies of the church to come and to read this. It's a first chapter. It's pretty long. We're going to actually start in the book of Judges, the very last verse there. And I'm going to invite Becky to come and kind of read the story with us. I'll invite you to remain reverently seated as we hear the word of the Lord from the book of Ruth this morning.
Starting with the final verse of Judges 21. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. Ruth chapter 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, so a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. And the names of their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite woman, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye and they wept aloud. And they said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the woman exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning.
Thanks be to God. The author of the book of Ruth takes the first 18 verses to sort of set the story in a historical context, a recognizable atmosphere with which to tell this narrative. It's as if the book of Ruth really does illustrate the main points of the book of Judges. No king in Israel, everyone does what's right in their own eyes, we end up doing evil in the eyes of the Lord, and so the cycle continues. It sort of starts out it actually starts out a pretty dark place, if you think about it. Once upon a time, says the author, in the days where the judges ruled the people of God, this would be sometime after Moses and Joshua, but before Samuel and the great kings, Solomon, David, and Saul. There was an Israelite, the story reads, a son of Ephraim who was born to Joseph the dreamer. You remember back in the book of Genesis, who was sold as a slave to his brothers in Egypt. Pretty dark times, right? This particular Israelite lived in a little village called Bethlehem. And Bethlehem at that point probably had 200 people that made up that town. How many of you graduated in a class that was larger than 200 people? Right? Think about you knew basically a lot of folks. And so this small town was your graduating class was larger than this small town for the most of you. And so Elimelech, whose name literally means Yahweh is my king. That's what his name means. Remember, in those days there was no king in Israel, but Elimelech's name testifies that he has a king. It's kind of ironic as the story pans out. So Elimelech is married to Naomi. Her name literally means the pleasant one. Naomi, the pleasant one. As we read to the end of the first chapter, we find out that Naomi refuses her name, right? Don't call me Naomi. My life has turned out bitter. Call me Mara. Also very ironic. So Elimelech is married to Naomi. They have two sons of no consequence, by the way. Let's recap. In the days where there was no king in Israel, everyone did evil in the eyes of the Lord. There was a great famine. What you also want to know is the name of the town, Bethlehem, literally means house of bread, right? Bethlehem is the house of bread, except that there's a famine. There's no bread in the house. Right? So this is a dark, very ironic story that's being told here. And because there's no bread in the house in Bethlehem, Elimelech, whose name means, Yahweh is my king, decides to abandon the promise of his own of his own land, and he moves the family to Moab. This small family was forced to move from the land that God has given his people, a land that was said to be full of what? Milk and honey, right? Milk and honey. This is the land of abundance. He was forced to uproot his family, move to a foreign land ruled by strange gods and a foreign king who served strange and foreign customs somewhere out east of the promised land. But when all of the milk and honey, it dried up and the famine had settled over Bethlehem, these children of the promise, these descendants of Abraham were forced into a land where they would live temporarily to provide enough to sustain the family. And then after the famine had gone by, I think the plan was pretty much to move back into the promised land. But here in chapter 1, the author takes the time to put this whole story in its context. And the author is very careful to actually name all of the important men in the drama. That puts it in its context. After telling of the famine and uprooting and relocating the children of the promise, the author does a very fun thing here. Then the author goes on to write all of the important men right out of the story. We named them, and now we're done with it. Basically, well, they died. And when they do, life gets exceedingly more difficult for the lady survivors. That's a pretty dark beginning to a story. The story actually gets darker. So there's no king. Everyone's doing evil in the eyes of the Lord. There's a famine, so the house of bread has no bread. We've abandoned the promise now, and we've taken our sons to a foreign country. And then we've given our sons to marry Moabite women, a practice specifically forbidden for the people of God to do. And so now we've broken covenant. We've relocated ourselves out somewhere else where Yahweh is no longer king, while temporarily taking refuge in the land east of the promise, governed by foreign kings and foreign rulers and strange unknown practices. These two sons matured. They've taken women of the land of Moab, a faithless act. And so what had started out maybe as a temporary arrangement, just to get through the rough patch of the famine and the drought, suddenly has turned into a more permanent situation. They've married women of that country. Doesn't look like we're going to be relocating anytime soon. We're settling down. We're putting down roots, which was the fear, and part of the reason why God said, don't do that. But that's not all that's happening. That kind of darkens the beginning of our story. While living in this strange and foreign land, the rest of the men, all of the men die, and they leave 3 widows in Moab. The men have been mentioned and then written off because this story is actually not about important men at all. The story has much to do about the women. The children of God have encountered hard times, and they've encountered difficult situations. And I want you to know today that God's people are not exempt from hard times or difficult situations. In fact, new life in Christ doesn't mean easy. New life in Christ does not mean easy. It doesn't mean that everything good in my life will suddenly get better. And it certainly doesn't mean that everything bad in my life will go away. And it doesn't exempt me from experiencing some of the tragedies that everybody experiences by living in a fallen world. But in difficult times, God's people are particularly tempted to exhibit a faithless behavior, taking matters into our own hands, doing what seems right to us. We refuse to trust God in the hard times and think to ourselves, maybe God is not leaving me here or bringing me through this. My first inclination is to get myself out of here as quick as I can. We often fail to exercise what Pastor Kayla was talking to her youth about on Sunday, spiritual perseverance in difficult times. Instead, we doubt God's ability to make a way for us, and we certainly doubt his plan to bring us through, and we do what seems right in our own eyes, as if we didn't have a king governing our lives at all. But this particular family from the tribe of Ephraim, living in the house of bread, Bethlehem, abandons God's promise. abandons God's plan, doubts God's ability to care for them in times of famine. They take matters into their own hands, and they seek refuge in a strange land east of the promise, governed by the gods of Moab. It seems like it feels like the right move. And I don't know if we could blame Elimelech from that decision, except it's here that the real crisis really takes place. When we take matters into our own hands, things don't always get better. And we see that play out here. Things actually get worse. The men of the house die, and now a daughter of Abraham is responsible for 2 young daughter-in-laws, and now stranded in a foreign land. And Naomi has no citizenship here. She has no right to claim any provisions. There's nobody left to stand up for her. There's no one there to support her. This daughter of Abraham, this sister of the covenant, is left with no good choices. Now, what are you going to do? And so, she makes the best choice that she can with what she's been given. She prepares to return home to her father and mother, back to the land of promise, where she will be recognized as a daughter of the covenant, as family. And although it will not be easy for her to return to Bethlehem, it will be, as Naomi has described, it will be bitter, that return. It will not be easy, it'll be bitter. And at least she has hope that in the land of Yahweh, if she goes back to the land of promise, she will be provided for under the stipulations of the law that cares for widows. Back in Bethlehem, she can lay claim to these covenant promises and the stipulations that provide for her safety and support, so she will not be taken advantage of. The law, the covenant stands up for her. If she stays in Moab, she got nothing. So it's not easy to go back home. For some people, to go back home is to admit failure. It's to confess defeat. It's to acknowledge that I made choices and I made decisions, and what I had to do now is turn around, to redirect my course, to repent is the word. To admit that what seemed right in my own eyes was in fact evil in the eyes of the Lord, and you know what, that feels bitter. Naomi makes the best choice she can. The bottom has fallen out of her world. She has no place else to go but home. God has disappointed Naomi. Her husband, her support, her companion has died. Her sons have died. There's no bread in the house of bread. And although we read the story and we know that her sons, Milyon and Kilion, they are grown men, right? Grown and able at least to marry. One of the great things about, or one of the things that makes biblical scholars think that perhaps maybe a woman authored this story is because the Old Testament text, the story of Ruth, specifically uses the words boy here, not men. Her boys have died, which is a verbal reminder that no matter how old a son gets, he's always his mama's little boy. He's always a little boy in his mama's eyes, right? And the other thing that allows scholars, or is the syntax that scholars suggest that maybe a female wrote this, was that when we introduced the men in the story, the first man, Elimelech, Elimelech is Naomi's husband. Naomi is not recorded as Elimelech's wife. The female comes first there. So we've made some big identifications there. It feels like a story that a lady would tell around the fire. God has disappointed her. Her little boys have died. The pain that she feels and the grief that she shares and the cup that she's forced to drink almost drowns her, and it tastes bitter. And so Naomi is going home. And right now, her life is bitter. Now, her life could get worse. It seems like it can always seem to get worse. But as she approaches the decision to return back to Bethlehem, we've got to keep in mind that her life is not likely to get too much better, not even when she goes home. It's not going to get much more sweeter and pleasant than it is right now. If she doesn't follow through on her decision to return to Bethlehem, her life will indeed get a lot worse. You see, because there really is a little hope that Naomi's life will get better, it's bitter right now. And because of the difficulty that she will face going back home, she wants to spare her daughters-in-law this curse. She wants to spare them the curse that she's experienced. And this is where love is introduced. It's the Hebrew word that needs to be pronounced from the way back of your throat part. So it's the word hesed. It's like you were about to cough and say it. H-E-S-E-D. This is what the biblical Hebrew word writes out for this loyal covenant kind of love. And it's introduced here in the book of Ruth. Orpah and Ruth, they're good people, great people. They may be Moabites, but they're exceedingly loyal. They make plans to go with Naomi back to Naomi's home. They have this kind of loyalty, this deep kind of hesed, this deep kind of love, that the great concern and affection for one another to accompany Naomi back to face the people of Bethlehem. And I think that Naomi would welcome these girls to live with her, to come back with her, to be her companion. In a life that is so bitter, void of love and affection, to have these two companions might be really, really tempting. But Naomi loves her daughter-in-laws too much to sentence them to the bitter life that she had at their age. You see, if they were to move back with her to Bethlehem, they would have to leave the security of their own family and the protection of citizenship in Moab, and the care of their gods when things got difficult. Naomi's sad story doesn't have to be their sad story too. And by the way, what happens to Orpah and Ruth if they go back with her to Bethlehem and then Naomi dies? And now both of those girls are stuck in a foreign land, under foreign rule, and they have no protection under the laws of the covenant for them. And so she's not about to sentence Orpah and Ruth to the same bitterness in her life that she has experienced when she was their age. They have a pretty good chance of finding happiness in the home of another man and build a life for themselves in their own land. This is love that Naomi expresses for Orpah and Ruth. Love always acts in the best interest of the beloved, even when it costs. Maybe especially when it costs. So 3 times Naomi urges them, go home. Right? In verse 8, this is literally a command Ruth gives them, as if she had authority over them. Go back, each of you, to your own mother's home. And she blesses them. May Yahweh show kindness to you for the kindness that you've shown to your dead and to me. May Yahweh grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. But the girls refuse to obey the command. And so in verse 11, she commands again. And this time she tries to reason it out. Ladies, listen. Am I going to get married again so soon? And then we're going to have what? Twins? Twin boys? And you're going to wait for them to grow up? Ridiculous, right? Go back to your home country. There, Orpah kisses her mother-in-law and goes back. And the scriptures give us no indication that she made a bad choice at all. There's no condemnation for Orpah. But Ruth refuses. She's the stubborn one. She refuses a second time and physically clings to Naomi. And so Naomi, in verse 14, commands and then she pleads with Ruth. But Ruth, at this moment, makes a radical decision. A very, very risky, and some would say not so intelligent choice. Ruth, she invokes the name of Naomi's God. And she claims that God as her very own people. And she claims that covenant as her covenant for herself in life and in death. Imagine, if you will, Ruth is clinging to the lower legs of Naomi, looking up into Naomi's face from the ground with tears flowing down her face. I mean, she manages simple and profound words through these deep sobs. She answers the command of her mother-in-law because she knows that if she obeys her mother-in-law, then she rejects her, and she's not about to do that. And so Ruth says, Naomi, my only home is with you. My only home is with you. Friends, this is love. This is the word chesed. This is that deep, deep, deep love that is far more concerned with the well-being of another, especially when it costs. I wonder that if in that moment there's this great flashback to years ago. I wonder if in those moments Naomi was taken back in her memory. Her husband, young and handsome and strong, he comes home to their house in Bethlehem angry and sad and worried. Naomi, listen, there's no water. The crops are going to fail again this year. But my cousin says that there is land and food available just across the river in Moab. I know we talked about this, but it's time. I have to go. You know, I'll send food and I'll send money whenever I can. You and the boys, you should stay with family until I can get us back on our feet. It shouldn't be maybe more than 2 cycles, maybe 3. And she says to her husband, no, I can't stay here. What do you mean you can't stay here? You can't be here by yourself. It's not safe for you. You know that. She says, I won't stay with my parents. He says, you have to. Take the boys to your parents. Your brothers will look after you. It won't be long. I will come back for you, I promise. And she says to him, and she clings to him, and there are tears in her eyes, and she says, no, you don't understand. If you go, I go. My only home is with you. Ruth makes this total commitment. Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back. Where you go, I go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord, may Yahweh deal with me ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. Ruth is making a total commitment, not only to Naomi, who she knows quite well, but she's also making a total commitment to Naomi's people that she doesn't know at all, to Naomi's God that she doesn't know, to live under a covenant that she doesn't really understand. She doesn't dress like the Bethlehem people. She doesn't talk like the Bethlehem people. She doesn't look like the Bethlehem people. She's making a total commitment, laying herself wide open in vulnerability. The only thing she knows about this God, this people, this covenant is what she has learned from the family and what she has seen lived out in Naomi. It would have been a lot easier for her, a lot smarter for her just to kiss her mother-in-law and go back to her own people. But Ruth makes a life choice without support group. She knows that the fruit of this decision may very well end in the bitterness of her lonely rejection and death. Not only has she broken with her family or her country or her faith, but she has also done this to commit herself to the company of an older woman who can offer her really nothing in return. This young girl has chosen an older widow in a world where life depends on the support of men. There are few things, I think there are very few things more radical. There are very few things more radical of faith in the memories of all of Israel than this love that seeks the best of the beloved, even at great costs. Ruth's decision here is probably more radical than that of Abraham, the father of our faith. Love, Hesed, that changes people. It actually makes a difference in the lives of people. Love, Hesed, that's what you can build a life on. That's what you can build a family on. That this kind of love you can build a society on, that you can build a culture around. My only home is with you. This Hesed is the kind of radical commitment, that kind of deep loyalty where we are invited to live out this character of God, this Hesed, this love for other people in our world on a regular, daily basis. This is the kind of love that changes people. It's the kind of love that has an impact. It's the kind of love that gets noticed. Ruth's decision to trust the rest of her life into the hands of a God she doesn't really know will prove to be a world-changing, life-altering moment in history, but there's more to that to come as her story unfolds. But we'll just sort of start to wrap things up by saying this. Out of the darkened ash of Naomi's life, suddenly a spark of light flickers. Real love pushes up from the ruins of her bitterness, and it turns to blossom. Ruth commits herself to Naomi no matter what. And I wonder, who among us exhibits this kind of faithful trust? Is this the love that we live out? A trust that stands firmly in the face of difficulty and disaster and say, my first response is not to get myself out of here, but it's to rest here until the Lord moves me. The kind of unreserved commitment and vulnerability when all around looks hopeless. This is the kind of radical faith that stands when the sensible decision would be just kiss your mother-in-law and go back to your family's home. This is the kind of love that God is looking for, this risky commitment that abandons all that we once knew and everything that is so very comfortable for us and familiar for us so that we can set out in this new adventure of life in Christ without bringing all the old baggage with us. Chesed, the Old Testament word for love that changes people, that has an impact that gets noticed by our world. My only home is with you. This is the kind of faith that holds nothing back, a faith that reserves nothing for later. It's a kind of faith that has no contingency plan. You know, if God doesn't come through for Naomi and for Ruth, if God doesn't come through, they're never going to make it out of Moab. They're never going to see Bethlehem. And you know what? You know what kills the kind of faith like this? Plan B. That's what kills it. Plan B. So long as there's a contingency plan. So long as you leave a way out, so long as you give yourself another option. You know, if God doesn't come through on this, we can always do that. This is what kills the kind of faith that Ruth demonstrates. There cannot be 100% commitment if there's a plan B in play. There can be no authentic life change, no world-altering love. There's no complete dependency upon God if you have an active contingency plan. Life gets hard, real hard. And God's people are not exempt from the disasters that life presents in a fallen world. God can seem distant when life gets hard, as if there were no king in Israel and we're just left here to free fall and do what seems right in our own eyes. We carry our contingency plans and our lists of options along with us through life, so that when life gets hard and the battle suddenly seems lost, when famine strikes and there is no bread in the house of bread, God doesn't seem to be providing for us the way we think He should provide for us, we can take matters into our own hands and do what seems best for us. Isn't it time? Isn't it time to give up our casual comfort, our comfortable Christianity, and live this exciting adventure of real new life in Christ with no contingency plans at all? No other hope for happiness or fulfillment but Him. If Jesus doesn't give me all that I need in this moment, then I have nothing. There's no plan B. There's no contingency. If God doesn't come through, that's it. We're all done. I've got nothing but dependence on Him. Do you feel maybe you want to grab a hold of His legs today, to look up into His face today and declare, where else am I going to go? My only home is with you. So that out of the dark and ash of Naomi's life, a spark of light begins to flicker. Love, real love, pushes up from the ruins to blossom. Ruth commits herself to Naomi no matter what. I wonder, do you have that kind of faith this morning? You can. Do you know that kind of love this morning? You can. I've asked Pastor Kayla and Sam to come and close us out in a brief song. We're not going to tarry long, honestly. But I would just ask, if it's time to lay down contingency plans, if you need a place to put plan B, it's right here. It's just here, Lord. And if you need a place to grasp the nail-scarred feet of Jesus, to look up into his eyes, if you just wish that there was like this physical spot where you could come and to meet him, that place is here. And you can, and if you've done this 100 times, if you've never done this before, you can just look up to him in that moment and say, here, Lord. My only home is with you. And if you don't come through, then together we got nothing. But we sang songs of great is thy faithfulness. And we've passed that song down from generation to generation to generation. And one of the things that we know beyond anything else is that God comes through when life gets hard. So long as he's king of my heart. And we don't take matters into our own hands. And our plan B isn't to uproot our family to the land somewhere east of the promise. So they're going to lead us in maybe a verse or two. If the Lord's been speaking to you, if you want a spot to come and to lay down your plan Bs, here's the spot. If you need a place to grasp the feet of Jesus and just to affirm and confirm, my only home is with you, this is the time, this is the place.